get rich on the energy you create. And that really is a motto for me now because the universe takes care of me. I get a lot of opportunities to do things, and I really have to focus on the energy I'm exchanging with somebody else, the energy I'm putting out in the world, either through emails or social. Like everything comes down to energy. And I feel like I'm at an energy level now that I'm attracting similar energies, and life is a lot more fulfilling. And I'm doing some really incredible work that I think I'm cultivating because I'm really focusing in on how I'm showing up in the world and how I am interacting with other people. And that reciprocation is coming back to me.
Welcome to the Blueprint Breakers podcast. What is a blueprint breaker? If you live your life outside the typical traditional lifestyle blueprint, you are a blueprint breaker. We are here to start a conversation, to assemble resources, and to build a community. This podcast is for empowered women in midlife and beyond who are preparing for a powerful next era of life. My name is Amy A. Palmer. I am your host and facilitator for our conversations. Sit back, relax, enjoy the show. To stay connected, up to date, and to receive all of our free resources and gifts along the way, join us at community.blueprintbreakers.com. 5 ways to raise your energy. I think we all could use a little bit of this. Do you ever find your energy coming and going, peaks and valleys, and sometimes you're feeling more negative than positive and you have a hard time sort of getting yourself out of the negative? Or do you ever find yourself surrounded by negative energy and really trying to overcome that and staying in a more positive state? That is the core to what today's episode's all about, even though we're going to get into a lot more than just that. So just to give you a little background, I read a book recently. It's called Seeking: 74 Key Findings to Raise Your Energy, Sidestep Your Self-Doubts, and Align with Your Life's Work by JJ DiGeronimo. And her book so resonated with me. I felt so many parallels to my own story and to many of your stories that I absolutely had to meet her and had to talk with her. JJ is a 3-time award-winning author, a speaker, a former executive. She comes from the tech industry. She was in tech for 25 years, and then she hit a wall from overproducing, over-delivering, over-committing, the whole executive corporate grind. And she decided she needed to make a massive change. And she sought professional help first, and then began a journey of self-discovery. And she also began to explore her spiritual side and connect with her inner power. Her transformation was profound. She went from feeling very overwhelmed to feeling connected to a higher purpose. And that's what led her to everything that she explores now. And again, we're going to talk about her book, where she shares everything that she learned along the way. And I think you will get more than a few interesting gold nuggets from our conversation. Hello, JJ. Welcome. Great to see you today.
Hi, Amy. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to get into this conversation. I have so many different topics that I would love to talk to you about after reading your book, which we're definitely going to get into today. But I wanted to start by finding out, when did you first realize that you needed to find a new mission, purpose, like that you needed to change direction? So I'd like to know when, and then how did you go about doing it when you realized it?
Well, I would like to say that I woke up one morning and been like, oh, it's time for me to do some soul searching. But the reality is that is generally not how it happens for most of us. Most of us are hit by a 2x4 in some form or fashion. We lose somebody, we have, a crack in our marriage, something happens with our kids, our family members, we lose our job. There's usually really big catalysts that really force us to push us in a direction to do some seeking. And that was for me. I mean, I've had different points in my life. I had to do a big one in 2002 and another one in 2013. And then really where I start writing this book is 2016, when I just, everything between, my parents were having issues, and then there were things happening in my marriage, and all this stuff kind of all happened at once, that I really just didn't know what I should be focusing on. I felt like I had a bigger
Mhm.
calling, but I didn't really know what that meant. And
Mhm.
that's kind of what really sort of was the beginning.
Right, right. So when you started to have that feeling, it sounds like it was just like an unsettled feeling in a lot of different areas. Uh, how did you first start taking action? Like what did, or maybe you didn't start taking action right away. Maybe it was a slower process.
Well, I went to a therapist, which wasn't a thing I had done really in the past, but I went there being like, I just don't know. I have all these great accolades, but I still am feeling so lost in my decisions, and all this stuff is happening in my house and in my life. She sent me to mindfulness training, which I didn't go the first time. I thought it was
Hmm.
absolutely ridiculous. I was like, that sounds like ridiculous. I'm not doing that.
Uh-huh.
I have this big job. I've got these young kids. Like, what the heck, mindfulness? In parallel to that, I did go to sort of a spiritual center, an energy center, and I did some tapping classes, which I didn't even know
Yes.
exactly what I was doing, but I was like, okay, I'll try that. And so one thing led to another. I went to a couple more classes, and I ended up going back to the therapist. She told me not to come back unless I went to mindfulness, which then I knew she was serious. So then I ended up in the mindfulness class. And I feel like life happens for you. Like things start to kind of move and push you in a direction if you're open to it. I could have said, like, hey, I'm never going to do mindfulness, and that would have been the end of it. And I guarantee you we would not be here right now.
Okay. So you kept exploring one thing at a time and it sort of led to the next thing. And it's because you were open to the messages that you were receiving and things as it played out for you.
Yeah,
Does
very
that
much
sound
so. I mean, I could have sat in my house and just read books and watched Netflix, and I would have continued to be unsettled, and I probably would have drank more or did things that probably weren't super healthy for me. But I could have done that too. And there were days I did that. But I would say
Mhm.
overall, I was really driven to be like, why am I here? What is this all for? I have all these great accolades, I have all these successes, yet I still don't really feel that complete.
Right, right. Yeah, when I was reading your story, it struck me because you had what I mean, it looked like you had everything you could possibly want, right? You were doing great in your career, you had this great family, great partner, like so there's so many aspects to your life that it just like looked like it was all there, but there must have been like to still feel sort of unsettled or to feel like there was something missing. There probably was also a little bit of why am I feeling like this? I should be happy with things as they are, that kind of thing. Did you experience any of that during that time?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. And in fact, for my 40th birthday, I'm 50 now. So my 40th birthday, I was working, but I just knew I had another calling in life, and I was moving through my career as I expected, yet I was had this inner turmoil that I could not deny. And I tell a story about wanting to go to Sedona for my 40th birthday by myself, because I felt like I
Mhm.
was at that point in my life where I was like, I can figure this out. Like, what is my problem? And that was like a really big deal to ask my husband to go on a trip by myself, even though I was making my own money, even though, I had plenty of vacation time, just carving out that time for myself was a really hard ask for me. And it really was kind of in the beginning stages of really leaning into myself.
Mhm. And can you speak a little bit more to that? Because, well, let me give you a little context. I've been talking to the listeners here at Blueprint Breakers about taking breaks, taking sabbaticals, having that time to yourself to pause and reflect and to figure out what you want to do. And I hear from a lot of people that they can't because of obligations to somebody else, other things going on. And so I thought it was really powerful as you shared sort of how that conversation went with your husband and how you sort of paved the way to be able to do that. Can you speak a little bit more to how you went about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I did have to ask my husband, which was painful. And it's not because he's not into me doing things, but because I didn't believe I deserved it. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't believe I deserved it. And I guarantee you that many of the women that are struggling in their own lives, but know they want to do something different or take that break, they're not giving themselves permission, and then they could not feel like they deserve it too. And so what I would suggest is start small. It's a Saturday morning. from 9 to 11, what are you doing for yourself? Or maybe it's a Sunday afternoon when someone's watching sports in the house. What are you doing for yourself? If you can't go on that retreat, if you don't want to go on that solo retreat, or you don't want to leave the township that you're in, what can you do around town by yourself to start building up the confidence to invest in yourself?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's great advice. I'm leading into that. I'm curious how your meaning of success has changed, if it has changed over time.
Well, it has definitely changed. And I have 3 chapters on my relationship with money and how do you really prioritize money? What energy do you give money? How does
Hmm.
energy define what you do and how you do it? Because that was a huge life lesson for me was money, and still is. But I would say that for decades, I was chasing that oasis of success, the title, the salary, the experiences. I was in a really intense career in Silicon Valley. I had a lot of things around me. I had access to a lot of things. I was making a lot of money. I really defined myself by all those things. And when I decided to go out on my own and do this work with women, and write these books and speak at conferences, I left all the things that defined who I was on the sidelines. And that was kind of part of my coming out too, in a lot of ways, because I didn't know who I was without all of those titles, paychecks, and just ways that I showed up for years. And so I really had to figure out who I was and kind of why I was here.
Yeah, yeah, that so resonates with me for sure. That's so tied into our identity for
Mhm.
years. We put so much work and effort in. So when that title, when that paycheck is not there anymore,
Yeah.
other ways. So how do you look at it now, on whether or not you feel successful or feel like you are doing what you're meant to do?
Mm. My friend told me a quote back in 2016, get rich on the energy you create. And that really is a motto for me now because the universe takes care of me. I get a lot of opportunities to do things, and I really have to focus on the energy I'm exchanging with somebody else, the energy I'm putting out in the world, either through emails or social, or even if I'm calling a maintenance company to help me do something, like everything comes down to energy. And I feel like that I'm at an energy level now that I'm attracting similar energies, and life is a lot more fulfilling. And I'm doing some really incredible work that I think I'm cultivating because I'm really focusing in on how I'm showing up in the world and how I am interacting with other people, and that reciprocation is coming back to me.
Yes, yes, love that. Now,
Mm.
speaking of energy, and as it sort of ebbs and flows at different times, any thoughts, or recommendations on how to recognize when you need to refuel, when you need to sort of get that energy back up, and then how to go about doing that?
Oh, sure. I love this topic. So first, way back in my first book, The Working Woman's GPS, I have a chapter called The Practicing Polluter. And I had some people in my life that were practicing polluters, and I had them in my life because I was a practicing polluter, right? Everything was like, I can't believe that happened to me. Why does this always
Mhm.
happen? Like everything I said had like, even if I said I was joking or even if I wasn't, being nasty about it, everything I said kind of had a more negative spin on it. I really
Yes.
wasn't living in a gratitude, a life of gratitude, being grateful what came my way. I was really just more naysaying and I was worrying and I had a lot of fear. And so sometimes you don't really know if you are a practicing polluter or not, but oftentimes you can look around you and see who are the friends you're attracting, what conversations are you having. And I think what I've even had to do is monitor my conversation, whether I'm just saying it in my head or if I'm saying it to other people. Like, are the things I'm saying on a regular basis more positive in nature or more negative in nature? And having that self inventory can be shocking.
Mm.
So that's the first thing. You got to start with like kind of who you are because you are mirroring what you are saying, even if you're not saying it out loud. If you're talking negatively about people you see on TV or your neighbors or somebody in the grocery store parking lot, your mind doesn't know. Your mind doesn't know it's not coming out of your lips. Your mind is just saying negative, negative, negative. So then you probably are attracting more negative energy. So that's the first thing is you have to do some self-inventory. And I'm really passionate about this because I was in a mud puddle a couple times in my life where all I was, and I didn't know it. I didn't have the self-awareness. I wasn't being mindful and I wasn't in the present moment. And when you're in the present moment, you can be more aware of what you're saying and how you're exchanging energy with other people. So if you find that you're kind of in the negative column more than you're in the positive, there's three things I would say to do. First and the easiest is pay attention to what you watch, right? Shows, anything on your phone. Are you watching a lot of stuff that is just would be considered negative or not really
Yeah.
that flattering or not really that helpful to the world? Second, pay attention to what you listen to. Are you watching the nightly news for 6 hours? Are you watching this like propaganda stuff all constantly? Man, I have completely turned off the TV. I just watch selected shows now, and there's things that make me laugh or happy or make me feel good. The
Right.
third thing is you have to pay attention to how you talk to yourself. And that is the most important thing. So, anytime you're going to start something, do something, schedule that time on Saturday morning, what are you saying to yourself? Are you saying, I don't deserve it? I shouldn't spend the money. I'm not worth it. What if I don't get anything out of it? What is my spouse going to say? If you're kind of in that real negative talk, you've got to find some space between that conversation in your head and yourself because you are not your thoughts, essentially. You are a being that is your thoughts are part of you. And so I think for many of us, we need to do some self inventory to see how we are moving through the planet. And with that, you will quickly see what you are attracting.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. Now, as you start to become aware of these thoughts, like you're noticing that there's negative thoughts there. Are you supposed to return, like how do you reframe? This is something I'm sort of right in the middle of learning. I've come a long
Mm.
way, but I still have a long way to go. In terms of how do you reframe? How do you sort of
Yeah.
change that never ending reel going on in your head?
Yeah, there's really no way to stop it. I mean, it's there. It's just a constant. It's supposed to protect you. And I'm reading a book right now called The Vortex by Esther Hicks and Jerry Hicks. And I'm also reading another one. And they're talking about sort of that ego energy is the harder part of the egg. And like you got to get
Mm-hmm.
beyond that into the egg itself. And so that is like the hard core of many of us is that naysaying energy that we are, people say, oh, it can protect you. And I talk about this in the book and it can be helpful. Yeah, in some cases it can be. If you're in like a terrible situation, it can be really helpful. But most of us are not in these like, fight or flight situations. We're just trying to
Right.
decide if we're going to spend some money on ourselves. I mean, it's
Right.
not really that
Right.
fight. Yeah. So recognizing that you have the voices, you have to be present to kind of hear them and be part of them. And a woman said to me, she names them. So she picks a name and says like, hey, so and so, and I don't like to use names because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and it doesn't really matter what the name is, but let's just call it Pluto or let's call it like a Mars or something. Hey, Mars, I appreciate that, but I'm gonna just think about this a little bit more. So like almost compartmentalizing that conversation to see if you even want to listen to it. And Jen Sincero in the book, You're a Badass, she says, instead of saying I'm going to do this, she says, I'm going to see how this goes. I'm going to check it out because she plays a trick on her ego energy to say like, I'm just checking it out. I don't need to make a major decision. Let me just see how this goes. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's how she sidesteps that self-talk.
Mm-hmm. Great, great. I think that's some good direction. And it sort of also relates to one of the stories that jumped out at me in your book. It wasn't about the self-talk part, but it was about negative energy and not letting it in. It was the story about the woman on the flight that was being really negative right from the beginning, and the way that you like physically barricaded yourself by focusing on your children and focusing on the gratitude to sort of block out her energy. And then you planted your feet firmly to sort of make sure that you're sort of shielding yourself, I think, when you're surrounded by negative energy. I thought that was a great tactic to use for that.
Yeah, because
So,
it's going to be around you. I mean, you can attract all the positive energy, but you're going to go to the grocery store, you're going to go to the local restaurant, you're going to be out in public at a wedding or an event, and there's just going to be people that just want to just drown you. Right? I mean, how many people I notice it more now than ever. Like people and as you raise your energy or be more mindful of your energy, people may fade away or not call you as much, and that really is a gift because you're evolving. And
Right.
I've had people that I used to call in the first 25 minutes, they would tell you everything that has gone wrong since last Wednesday. I just
Right.
don't have the space for that anymore. I
Right.
just don't even have, because once I'm off that call, I got to get my energy way back up again. And so I'm gonna have to do a
Hmm.
lot to get it back up again. So I just feel like right now I realize that time is my biggest asset and my frequency is so important to me. Like what level am I working at on a regular basis? And
Hmm.
what triggers me? Like, what are my regular triggers and how do I start working around them? And the book I'm reading
Hmm.
now, and I read books all the time, but I'm reading one of the Esther Hicks books right now. And she's like, you need to just count to 15 seconds before you say anything, especially to something that's going to trigger you, which sometimes can be hard as a parent, as a spouse, as a daughter, as a friend. And
Hmm.
it's amazing how when I count to 15 seconds, sometimes the people that are around me change their story or they talk about something else because I don't have an initial reaction like I used to have. It's amazing how things can shift so quickly, even if I say nothing, like as though I'm just processing it or deciding if I want to process it. Instead of saying, oh, hell no, we're not doing that. Or who do you think you are? Can you believe it? Like, I'm like, okay, let me just sit with this for 15 seconds and decide how I want to respond.
The other thing that I read about in your book, Seeking, was you really became very masterful at being able to listen to your internal voice and your instinct and really being able to recognize those nudges and whispers that would come along. Any thoughts or guidance for the rest of us that are trying to find that inner voice and really tune into it?
Well, I will say that sometimes, like, so I've been getting these messages for a while, and usually when I get it, like in 2006, I got a message, bring the women together. And my first initial response with my ego was like, who am I? Who would come? What if nobody
Mhm.
came? How would I pay
Yeah.
for that? Like right away, blah, 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 blah. I started all the
Yeah.
reasons why it's not going to work. And I did nothing with it for 2 years, 2 years. I just sat on it. And then finally I did it because I needed it so badly just to be with like women that could help me kind of move through being a mother and having these crazy jobs and crazy schedules. And then, I got another message in, I think it was 2016. I was on a stage in Seattle speaking. And as I was leaving the stage, it says, bring the women together outside. And right away, I'm like, oh, right. Like, I'm going to bring them together outside. We're in a conference center. So I feel like usually if I hear it, it's like I right away say all the reasons it's not going to work.
Right. Right.
So it's like, and it's the most random messages. Like, and that ended up being, me bringing the women together outside. 2 years later, I started retreats for professional women because they needed to ground.
Yeah.
But like the way I thought it had to happen intimidated me to no end. And so I didn't do anything for a long time until I ended up calling up one of the energy practitioners I work with and just sort of sorting it out with her of how to go about it. And I think like even in 2000, I think 20 it was, or maybe 21, I was leaving Mount Shasta. I was leaving a retreat myself. And I was looking at Mount Shasta in the background, heading to San Francisco. And I got the message, bring the mystics together. And I'm like, what? Bring the mystics together? What are you talking about? I work with women in business. And I feel like every time I'm like, that's crazy. So I feel like many of us get messages,
Yeah.
but
We
we
judge
discount
them.
them. We
We
discount them
judge.
so quickly.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that we don't pay attention to them. So I
Hmm.
think honestly, like if you get messages in your sleep, I'm told to journal when you first wake up. If you get a message that you think is crazy, just write it down. You don't have to make a decision. You don't have to, but I do feel like the universe guides us and shares things with us through other people, through TV shows, through, workshops we're part of. We get these messages and we don't really know exactly what they mean, but it's like the universe's way of just kind of guiding us to consider our next step, even if it's years out from manifesting.
The other sort of concept or phrases that you talk about is around soul energy and ego energy. And I love the way that you articulated that because you put words to something that I've been feeling and experiencing, and you just really described it really well. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Mm. Well, most of us live in ego energy. We come into
Yeah.
this planet and
Mhm.
we come in, our eyes open up, and I feel like regardless of what you believe in, I'm going to use the universal light or God. That's what I believe in. But whatever you call it, it doesn't matter. It's the higher energy, right? And so
Mhm.
we come in as like almost like a teardrop of this higher energy that turns our eyes on. And I believe that one of our goals here as a human is to tap into that light that was like turned our eyes on. But really, we
Mhm.
have to crack through our ego to do it because our ego here is to protect us. And so a lot of times we tell ourselves, no, not now, not you, not us. We can't do this, not enough money. And I feel like you really have to train yourself to pay attention to how you talk to yourself, what you say to yourself. And are you living in fear, doubt, and worry, or are you living in love and gratitude? Because it takes a real focus effort to shift from living in fear, doubt, worry, the I can't, I won't, I don't know how to, it's not going to work, to I'm grateful for.
Mhm.
And like that shift for me took a while, years, honestly. But now that I live more in the I can, I appreciate, I'm grateful for, isn't this great concept? Like you really have to work at shifting yourself to the other side, which is really the soul energy, right? Is that beautiful gold light that's within all of us, that connects all of us. Magic really starts to happen. It really allows you to live in the flow of the universe and not have to heavy lift every single thing in your life. And I know a lot of women that really have been lifting and grinding and producing for so long that we all could kind of be more into the light and really sort of
Mhm.
live within our flow. But it takes a little bit of time. And I feel like that's why I wrote the book Seeking is I wanted to share how I moved from the ego energy to the soul energy and how I shifted my frequency and my flow.
Mhm. Excellent. I'm going to make sure that I link to the book in the show notes so everybody can access it. But tell me a little bit more about the book for the listeners.
Well, Seeking is my third book, and it's a book about how do I keep my energy going? How do I kind of elevate to that next level? I think for many of us, we can get stuck in our situations so easily and almost kind of quit on ourselves. And I think for many of us, we have a lot more living to do. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, a lot of times we don't know how to get out of our own way to do it. And so many of us will sit on the side of the pool ledge thinking about going in the water, but we never, ever get wet. And I think if you're listening to this and you're with us at this moment, you probably have more to do on this planet. And you're might be trying to figure out how do you get that going? Or maybe you've done a little, but it puttered out on you and you're like, do I restart that? I would say that life is happening for you. And that if you're listening to this, this is another message from the universe to say, yes, you can do it. We're here to support you. And here are some resources to do it. And I think for many of us, we just need these little nudges to remind ourselves that we are part of something bigger and that we have everything we need to do what we agreed to do while we're on the planet. But sometimes we just have to be reminded of how to get around those obstacles. And I think Seeking is one of those books that can really help women decouple themselves so that they can move in the direction they desire.
Hmm. Well, I want to thank you for writing the book and for putting it out there into the universe. It very impactful. It resonated on so many different levels. And what I love about it is, yes, it does a great job of articulating and naming emotions and experiences that so many of us are going through, but you also incorporate very tactical guidance and advice at the same time. So you cover both areas, which is
Mm,
hugely valuable. So
mm.
thank you for that, for sure.
Thank
um,
you.
as we get ready to wrap, so the name of this episode is 5 Ways to Raise Your Energy. And I've heard several from you today. And I just want to make sure that we recap it for everybody.
Yeah,
So, so
I'd happy to
five
do that.
ways. Yeah.
Yes. So the first way is pay attention to how you're talking to yourself. That's the first thing. And many of us have to take mindfulness classes to even figure out how to do that. So if you are wondering what that is, check out John Kabat-Zinn, sign up for a mindfulness class. It is something that you will not regret and was probably a cornerstone for the work that I do today. Second, pay attention to what you're paying attention to. What are you watching? What are you reading? What are you listening to? Three, mind your relationships, right? Are your
Mm.
relationships, are they somebody that drags you down? Is it something you have to think about? Is it something that you're, really thinking like, is this good energy or bad energy? Like mind your relationships. Really think about the relationship as a whole, right?
Mhm.
The fifth, fourth thing is just pay attention to how you're showing up in the world. Are you sharing love and light? Are you part of the practicing polluters of the world, right? And this can be different by the minute because I have to
Yes.
say, like, my bank can set me off in about 30 seconds. I go in there and just sometimes the questioning when I have all my IDs, it could set me off. So I really have to
Mhm.
practice how I show up in the world, even on things that I really kind of get under my skin, the inefficiencies.
Mhm.
And I think the last thing is just really thinking about where you want to throw your energy. Like, what is important enough to you for the next decade that you want to participate in? What is something that is calling you? What is something you're curious about? Like, really start to lean into that. Make a phone call, listen to a YouTube video, read a book, get in touch with someone who's already down that path. Because there's no accident you're hearing this. You do have more work to do on the planet. And for you, it's just about kind of getting into that flow and working down the path that is calling you.
Great. Awesome. JJ, is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that we shared or talked about today before we say goodbye?
Well, I just want to thank you so much for having me. You can find me on most social. We'll put the social links below. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. I answer all my DMs and everything. So you can always reach out to me directly. So thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, JJ.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for today's episode of the Blueprint Breakers podcast, 5 Ways to Raise Your Energy. Special shout out to today's guest, JJ DiGeronimo. Please check out her book, Seeking. You can find it on Amazon. I would like to quickly share my disclaimer. I am not a therapist, doctor, lawyer, financial advisor, etc. This podcast is for your entertainment and information only. I encourage you to take what I share here as a launching point to discover what is right for you. And to you, thank you for listening. Thank you for your 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. And thank you for sharing this episode with your friends. Join our Insider Network where you can get all the behind the scenes information about upcoming episodes, free giveaways, resources, etc. Join us there, community.blueprintbreakers.com. This week we are featuring a link to JJ's free course, 10 lessons I gained from my mindfulness practice. So please join us at community.blueprintbreakers.com. And lastly, if you enjoy this podcast series and would like to support us, I ask you to grab a copy of my ebook, Heal and Restore, the 7-Step Guide to Joy, where you can find that at restore-joy.com. Have a wonderful week. Keep on breaking those blueprints and writing your own.